Dystopia, Visions of the Apocalypse, Volume 3, The War of the Apocalypse, The Rise of the Citadel, by Arthur Dubthach, Part 1, The Coming Darkness, Chapter 1, The Whistle of the Dead. The whistle arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked inside a corrupted audio file that nobody in Glasgow was meant to hear. The file, named ledgerendfinal.wave, had travelled through a dozen darknet relays before surfacing on a cracked phone in the East End. The man who first opened it, a low-rank runner known only as Wee Davy, expected it to be bad hip-hop, a police scanner clip, or maybe fresh dirt on a rival crew. But what came through the tiny speaker was neither music nor speech. It was a sound that made people stop talking, a single, long, trembling whistle, human, but not quite, like breath forced through lips moments before death. Behind it, faint static. And under that static, Davy swore he heard it, a distortion of a voice, broken, shaking, determined. He replayed it 10 times. The room seemed to get colder each time. Davy didn't know the voice belonged to Connor Blackwood, but the people he took the file to did. Under the derelict roof beams of the old Govan dry dock, 20 men and women gathered around a battery-powered radio that had seen too many winters. Most of them came from the underworld, some with reputations whispered in pubs, others with histories so dark no one dared even joke about them. At the centre sat Maggie McLaren, known on the streets as Iron Moor, matriarch of the city's oldest criminal syndicate. She was not tall, nor physically imposing, but she carried the kind of authority that made even hardened men sit straight. Davy handed her the phone with both hands, as though passing a sacrament. "It's him," he whispered. "It's Blackwood. From the papers. The dead one." Maggie pressed play. The whistle filled the air, long, thin, echoing like it came from the bottom of a well. When it ended, she didn't speak. She stared into space, thinking, calculating. Finally she asked, "This went out live, before he—" "Aye," Davy said. "Encrypted, but it broke out. People are sharing it already. How many have heard it? Hundreds, maybe thousands by tonight." Maggie closed her eyes. Connor Blackwood had been a thorn, not to her, but to the establishment. In the weeks before his death, he'd stirred the waters of Westminster, MI5, and Scotland Yard. Everyone knew he'd uncovered something monstrous. Everyone suspected he'd died for it. She listened to the whistle again. This time, she caught the faint shape hidden behind the static. 7 nearly inaudible words. "Prepare. They are coming. Defend the north." The room fell silent. Outside, the Clyde rolled black and sluggish beneath a bruised sky. February wind battered the broken windows. "Jesus," muttered Malky Burns, ex-para, and one of Maggie's lieutenants. "If this is real, it is real," Maggie said, voice low. Blackwood never lied, and he never scared easy. Another voice spoke, Callum Strain, discharged from the British Army after the war in the Baltic states, and now unofficially head of half the city's ex-militia community. "Connor knew something," Callum said. "Something big, something coming for us all. That whistle wasn't a warning. It was a deathbed message." Maggie nodded slowly. "Aye, and we'd be fools to ignore a dying man's prophecy." By nightfall, the whistle had spread across the whole of Glasgow, shared by dealers and smoky flats, passed between homeless veterans huddled under bridges, sent in private groups of young activists and old gangs who barely spoke otherwise. Played in taxicabs, played in nightclubs, played in the fading light of countless living rooms. Its effect was the same everywhere: unease, silence, a creeping sense that something vast and dreadful was about to fall upon Britain. Not from an enemy abroad, but from its own government. At 1:14 a.m., a convoy of 18 military lorries was seen thundering northbound on the M6, lights blacked out, escorted by armoured police vans. At 2:03 a.m., the lights in Manchester flickered and died. At 2:07 a.m., Birmingham began to burn. At 2:46 a.m., every supermarket supply chain in Britain, simultaneously shut down, and at 3:10 a.m., a leaked memo hit the darknet. Depopulate Directive. Phase 1 commenced. By dawn, Britain was at war with its own people. And in Glasgow, the city Conor Blackwood had loved, the city that heard his final breath, the underworld, the veterans, the dock workers, the students, the pensioners, the battered, the brave, the forgotten, the feared, all began to prepare, just as the dead man had asked. Chapter 2. The Last Convoy. The last food convoy left the south, under a sky the color of a healing bruise. No one knew it was the last. Not the drivers. Not the soldiers tasked with escort. Not the harassed logistics officer who signed the digital manifest and rubbed his eyes, assuming there would be 100 more. They were just numbers on a screen, at first. Convoy 7F-Black. Destination, SC Scotland Central Distribution. Cargo, mixed food and essentials. Escort, level 2. 18 articulated lorries, 4 armored police carriers, 42 armed personnel. By the time they were halfway up the M6, the order came through. Divert convoy to Altroute 11. Tongue classification, OBSIDIDAN. Driver level clearance, redacted. Do not disclose route change to civilian personnel. Lock instructions to command level authorization only. The driver of the lead lorry, a woman called Jenny, who had 3 kids in Newcastle, and stress headaches that never went away, didn't see the full text. Her navigation tablet simply blipped, mapping a new route that cut away from the main artery and into an older, less traveled road towards a facility she'd never heard of. She frowned at the sat-nav. Bastard things glitched again, she muttered, tapping the screen. In the carrier ahead, a police sergeant checked his own device, saw the updated instructions, and felt his stomach clench. He recognized the code word Obsidian. He'd seen it once in a briefing years ago, an emergency protocol, national security highest order. He keyed into the cabin's internal comms, voice dry. All units, this is primary escort. Confirm route update to Alt-11 received. One by one, voices crackled back. Confirm, primary. Alt-11 selected. Confirm. I got it. He looked out through bulletproof glass at the long trailing line of food, fuel, medicine, and supplies meant for the central Scottish distribution hub that served Glasgow, Edinburgh, and half the Highlands. Copy that, he said softly. Maintain speed and formation, and keep your eyes open. In Glasgow, nobody knew about the route change. What they knew was that shelves were already thinning. Deliveries had been late all week, blamed on weather and protests further south. Videos were circulating of rioting in Manchester and Birmingham, people smashing windows, people standing in endless queues for rations that turned out not to exist. In Govanhill, a small corner shop owner named Terrick counted crates, keyed figures into a worn tablet, and came to the same conclusion 3 times in a row. There's nothing left to sell next week, he whispered to his wife. She shrugged, tired. Maybe the next convoy comes with double. Maybe, he said. He didn't believe it. None of the independent traders did. They had learned to read the quiet language of supply chains, much the way sailors once read the language of the sea. Delays had currents. Missing items had tides. Somewhere underneath it all, something was shifting. By midday, a rumor started in the East End. The convoys have stopped, governments holding everything south of the line. By evening, it had shape. They're diverting the convoys to secure facilities. Distribution centers are empty. Only government zones are getting full rations. By night, it was a certainty shuttered in bars and whispered in dark hallways. They're cutting us off. It's starting. Maggie McLaren was never one to trust rumors. She trusted patterns. She built an empire that way, not by having the loudest crew or the most brutal enforcers, but by watching shifts and flow, where goods went, where money stalled. Which parts of the city went quiet after midnight for no good reason. For 2 weeks, she had watched some invisible hand twist the arteries of the country shut. Fuel had grown harder to source. Not impossible, just controlled. Essential antibiotics had shot up in price on the underground market, despite there being no official shortage. Military transport had been seen more often on the motorways, but never stopping, never intervening, just moving like silent wolves. And then there was Connor Blackwood's whistle. She sat at the long scarred table in her secure room above the old bookies, maps of Britain pinned beside CCTV feeds, and even older, more reliable notes scribbled in actual ink. On the table lay a printed copy of the Darknet memo, its title stark, Depopulate Directive. Phase 1 commenced. It could have been fake, psychological ops, some kid with time and code on their hands. But Connor's whistle. The secretive troop movements. The supermarkets awaiting delivery for days. Patterns. Malky Burns stood beside her, arms folded, expression tight. We don't know if that memo's real, he said. Could be something leaked from a contingency plan. Could be old. Could be bait. From the far side of the room, Callum Strain shook his head slowly. I've seen enough field intel in my time, he said. The format's right. The language is right. And that distribution list. He tapped the bottom of the printout, where a series of redacted lines were visible, the black bars shaky from being poorly scrubbed. Beneath the censoring, faint office jargon could be seen. Names of directorates, operational branches, emergency oversight committees. It's real enough to treat like gospel, Callum finished. Maggie didn't answer for a moment. She looked from the memo to the large map of Glasgow on the pinboard. Dozens of coloured pins marked the territories of crews, allies, neutrals, and unknowns. Strips of string connected them to notes about ex-military clusters, suspected arms caches, safe houses, sympathetic counsellors, and disillusioned cops. Above the map, pinned dead center, was a small black and white press photo of Connor Blackwood. Smiling slightly, head tilted, expression wry, preparing. They are coming. Defend the North. She spoke quietly, but everyone in the room fell silent. They're not sending food, she said. Very soon, they will send something else. The machines that cut the numbers down, the squads that make it tidy, the bullets with forms and signatures behind them. Aye, Malky said. Death wrapped in legality. And they'll start in the cities, Maggie went on, where the ones who might fight back are grouped into nice easy boxes. They'll expect panic, chaos, people turning on each other for crumbs. They'll laugh as we devour ourselves. Her eyes hardened. I don't plan on amusing them. Callum stepped closer to the map. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we stop behaving like prey before the predator arrives, she said. I'm thinking, if the convoys have stopped, we treat that as a declaration of war. The government has cut us loose. Fine. Then we cut them off, here, now, before their boots set foot in this city in numbers. Malky gave a low whistle. You're talking about fortifying Glasgow, he said, turning the whole city into a kind of, what, fortress. Maggie's gaze drifted over the board, the tower blocks, the old shipyards, the derelict factories, the catacombs of rail tunnels and forgotten service ducts. Not the whole city, she said. She picked up a black marker and drew a rough perimeter around the river, slicing through districts, enclosing some, leaving others outside. This, she said, this will be our core, dense, defensible, hard to move tanks in, easy to booby-trap. High vantage points, underground routes, access to the river. She stepped back. We make a city inside the city, she said. A heart that can keep beating, even if the rest of the body is cut. We fill it with food, fuel, medicine, fighters, families, engineers, anyone willing to stop being a victim. Callum's eyes tracked the perimeter she'd drawn. It wasn't tidy, it wasn't clean, but it had logic. He saw choke points, he saw angles for ambush. He saw natural high ground in the unforgiving geometry of the high-rises, just waiting for sandbags and reinforced windows. You're talking logistics on a scale we've never tried, he said slowly. We'd need to bring in supplies before they lock the country down fully. We'd need to convince the other crews to play nice. We'd need to get word to the ex-servicemen, the community groups, the lot. You're not suggesting a gang alliance. You're talking about... He searched for the right word and found none that fit. Maggie gave him one. I'm talking about a citadel, she said softly. I'm talking about making Glasgow the one place in Britain that's ready when the purge begins. Malky blew out a breath. A citadel, he repeated. Jesus, why not? Maggie asked. You know what they call our people in Westminster? The ones from here? From the schemes? Callum shrugged. Scum, Maggie answered for him. Expendable. Resource draining. A burden on the economy. They've been training themselves to see us as numbers for years. We're just finishing the lesson for them. She stabbed the marker at the map. Let them think Glasgow will be the easiest to break, she said. Let them think our chaos works in their favor. When they come to clear us out and implant whoever's left, they'll find we've been busy. She turned away from the board, decision already made somewhere deep inside her. Get me the crews, she told Malky. All of them. Even the ones who still hate us. Tell them there's money in it if you have to. Tell them there's glory. I don't care. Just get them in the room. She faced Callum. And you, get me the soldiers. The ones who walked away from the flag when they saw what it actually stood for. I want the lads with the nightmares. The ones who know what this kind of operation looks like. We're going to need them to teach the rest how to stand when proper war comes to the streets. Callum's lips quirked at that. Aye, he said quietly. We've got plenty of those. Folk who've already seen one empire rot from the inside. And start buying everything that keeps bellies full and lights on, Maggie added. Food, batteries, medicine, fuel. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care if it's cheap. Stock it in the secure units, the old warehouses, the basements that don't flood. We'll grow what we can, later. For now we hoard like dragons. Malky nodded. It'll be noticed, he warned. If we start stockpiling on that scale, someone in some office will see anomalies in the numbers. They'll get curious. They were going to get curious anyway, Maddie said. This way, they find us when we're ready. She tapped Connor's photo with her knuckle. He told us to prepare, she said. I'm done pretending he was talking in metaphors. 2 days later, the last convoy never arrived at the central Scottish distribution hub. The staff received no warning. They waited, checked screens, fielded calls from desperate supermarket managers, and refreshed tracking apps that simply showed the convoy symbol frozen at a nameless junction somewhere in northern England. At first, they blamed technical glitches. Then, a system update. Then, they simply stopped asking questions. Because the messages came through from above. All inbound delivery suspended until further notice. Do not discuss with media. Refer queries to press office. A junior manager in a crumpled shirt stared at the note on his terminal and went pale. Suspended? He whispered. But we don't have anything stored. We ship as it arrives. His supervisor put a hand on his shoulder. Not our call, she said dully. We follow the new instructions. We let the government handle the rest. That's not. She squeezed his shoulder a little harder. It's not our call, she repeated. Elsewhere in the building, overtime workers silently closed shutters on empty loading bays. Outside, the car park was strangely quiet. A few empty pallets, a crisp packet blowing in the wind. Far to the south, the convoy rolled directly past the turnoff that should have led north. Jenny noticed. That's wrong, she said to herself. That junction gone by too quick. She checked the sat-nav again. The tablet insisted she was on the correct route. Her radio hissed. Convoy lead, this is Escort 1. Be advised, Alt 11 route is confirmed. Do not stop unless directed. She clicked the button. Copy that, she said, though her stomach twisted. In the back of her cab, 2 cardboard boxes had toppled during the last bend. She saw the label on one. Its black font, standardized and unimaginative. Emergency ration packs. Civilian aid. For a fleeting moment she allowed herself a thought. Maybe this is good. Maybe they're rushing supplies somewhere that needs it more. Maybe the rumors are just that. Then she remembered her youngest asking why the snack shelves in their local shop were empty now. In the housing schemes of Glasgow, Phones pinged all through the evening. My cousin works at the depot. Nothing's coming in. Mate at the supermarket says deliveries cancelled for the week. Saw army trucks, no logos, headed east. Heard they're guarding food with guns in London. At first, folk did what folk always did. They shrugged, made compromises, pooled what they had, muttered about politicians, and hoped it would work itself out. But this time, something in the city's gut said otherwise. This time, there was the whistle. This time, there was a sense that this was the thing so many of the mad old ones had warned about. The ones in pubs, the ones in street corners, the ones who'd come back from war with eyes that saw too far. They'd always said, "One day, they'll come for the numbers, not the names. You'll see." Now, Glaswegians looked at barcode scanners and ration tokens and surveillance cameras and wondered if they were already numbers waiting to be rounded down. Hannah Ma watched the last convoy that wasn't on her laptop in her tiny flat just off Sochi Hall Street. Not in real time. No one had that level of access. But someone she knew in the old media had sent her a file, a grainy drone clip of the trucks peeling off the main motorway, heading towards a ring of high fences and floodlights that didn't appear on public maps. "Watch this," the message had said. "You were right about them. I wish I'd listened properly when there was still time." Hannah had replayed the clip until the screen blurred. She knew the logo stamped on the side of the facility. A stylized crown, flanked by laurel leaves, and a suspiciously blank shield. The same logo that had appeared at the bottom of some of Connor Blackwood's last photographs. The ones he'd taken of unmarked flights into certain air bases, of new construction out in forgotten corners of the Isle of Grain, of warehouses that had security far beyond what standard logistics required. She minimized the video and opened an audio file. Not Connor's final whistle. She'd heard that so many times it now lived in the arch of her ribs, but another recording. One he'd sent her before everything spiraled. "They're doing something with the food chains, Han," his voice murmured through the tinny speakers. "Not just corruption, not just theft. Structural changes, centralization, emergency preparedness. That's the language. With their claws in every point where things can be turned off at the tap." She swallowed. The tap had just been turned. She clicked open an encrypted chat window. "Hannah, you've seen latest drone file? They diverted 7F to secure site. Contact, I. Orders say reallocation. No details. Hannah, got confirmation from Glasgow Hub. Deliveries cancelled. Indefinite. Contact. It started then. Hannah, yeah. It has. Her fingers hovered over the keys. For months she'd tried to ring alarm bells through official channels. Her newspaper had shuttered under financial pressures. Her sources had been Meandle. She'd been labelled unstable, a conspiracy theorist, a burnout clinging to her dead friend's last obsessions. But the convoy divert changed the equation. If no food came north, Glasgow would starve. Unless someone did something extraordinary and horrible and necessary. She stared at the blinking cursor, heart pounding. "Hannah, I need to get a message to the people who can still move things without going through official routes." Contact. You'll be crossing a line if you go there, Hannah. No going back. Hannah, there's no back to go to. Not anymore. Contact. I can get a word to someone. Govern woman. McLaren. But if she takes you seriously, you'll be in deep. Hannah, I've been in deep since I watched Connor die on a live stream. Just send her this. The last convoy didn't come north. We're cut. Blackwood was right. I can prove it. Contact. Done. Don't say I didn't warn you. She leaned back in her chair and exhaled. The whistle had reached the underworld first. Now, the facts needed to reach them too. And behind it all, a simple, terrifying reality pulsed like a second heart. If Glasgow didn't prepare, it wouldn't survive. In a private hospital in Edinburgh, a member of Parliament stared at his private terminal, jaw clenched. The message was clear. In light of ongoing civil disturbances, His Majesty's government has activated contingency plans. You are required to deliver statements emphasizing calm, faith in government response, and the temporary nature of supply issues. Do not speculate. Do not criticize. Failure to comply will be considered dereliction of duty. He scrolled down. There, buried in the automated mail, was a phrase that made his insides go cold. Population pressure is projected to drop to sustainable levels within 18 months. Population pressure. He thought of his constituents lining up in food banks. He thought of packed tower blocks and old folk afraid to put the heating on. He thought of the way the Prime Minister had avoided giving any concrete answers for months now, dancing around phrases like resilience and necessary sacrifices. On his bedside table lay a printed article from months back, one of Connor Blackwood's last. He'd kept it because it had seemed too wild to be true, but something in him had whispered, "Hold on to this, in case." Headlines stared up at him. The Depopulation Blueprint, How Crisis Management Became Policy. He reached forward with trembling fingers and underlined a passage he'd skimmed at the time. The most efficient way to reduce population pressure, in the eyes of certain policy architects, is not war abroad, but controlled collapse at home. Deny access to essentials in a temporary emergency, blame external factors, and let famine and internal unrest do the work. Add selective containment measures, and you maintain control over the survivors. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe Blackwood had not been exaggerating. "God forgive us," he whispered. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, thin, the kind that turned grey the moment it touched ground. On the third day after the last diverted convoy, the first supermarket in Glasgow saw a full-on riot. It started small. A man tried to take more than the allowed number of tins from a half-empty shelf. Another customer confronted him. A shelf. A slap. Security stepped in. Someone filmed it. Someone else screamed that staff were hiding goods out back. Within minutes, people were pounding on the doors to the stockroom, accusing the teenage and employees of hoarding. Shelves toppled. Bottles smashed. Alarm bells rang. By the time police arrived, half the store was wrecked and 3 people lay bleeding on the floor. The footage spread faster than any official statement. Within hours, similar scenes played out in different variations across the city. Shoving matches at petrol stations, shouting matches in pharmacies that had no antibiotics left, queues dissolving into jostling scrums. In living rooms and stairwells and break rooms, people watched the chaos and thought, if it's like this after 3 days, what's it going to be like in 3 weeks? Some panicked. Some stole. Some shut their doors and hoped. And in a handful of basements, workshops and backrooms, a different thought took root. We can't survive this as individuals, but maybe we can as a city that decides not to reet itself. That night, in the old Govan dry dock, the room was full. They came in small knots, arriving through different doors, accompanied by lookout boys who melted back into the shadows as soon as their charges were inside. Gang lieutenants in designer tracksuits. Quiet old men with scars that spoke of older wars. A middle-aged woman with tattoos fading on her forearms. A community organizer who knew every tenant in 3 tower blocks. A wiry priest who kept his collar but had long since lost his patience with sermons. A nurse still in scrubs, face lined, eyes blazing. A man in a bike courier jacket whose backpack didn't clink like food apps usually did. They filled the space with cigarette smoke and low mutters, glancing at each other with suspicion and curiosity. When Maggie stepped up onto the improvised dais, an old pallet stacked on beer crates, the muttering died. She didn't need to shout. Her voice carried anyway. "You know who I am," she said, "and I know who you are. If we were meeting last year, half of you would be thinking how best to stab the other half in the back." A ripple of laughter. Dark, but real. She let it pass. "Today," she went on, "we all have bigger problems." She held up a thick folder in one hand, rustling with printed memos, screenshots, satellite photos, signed testimonies. Anna had delivered it herself earlier that day, eyes ringed, voice hoarse, but burning with the same dogged fury Connor had carried. "These," Maggie said, "are proofs that what you've all been feeling in your bones is true. The government has stopped sending us the things we need to live, not by accident, Not because of strikes or storms. By design. Someone shouted, "Aye, we know they're bastards. That's no news." More laughter, shameless and bitter. "Aye," Maggie agreed. "We've all known they were bastards since we were bairns. But we also knew there were rules. Lines they had to pretend not to cross. Elections to pretend to win fair. Journalists to pretend to answer to. That's over, now." She held up a sheet with the depopulate directive header. "They've stopped pretending," she said. "They're pulling the trigger on a plan that sees folk like us as surplus units. Numbers to be trimmed down so the nice graphs in their reports look tidy again." She let that hang in the air. "You've seen the footage," she continued. "Shelves empty, people fighting over bargains, police watching instead of helping. This is just the start. This is them letting us begin to eat each other before they come in with containment measures." Her expression hardened. "You've heard the whistle," she said quietly. "The whistle of the man they killed for trying to tell us this was coming." Silence. Even the ones who pretended not to care, who had dismissed the story as melodrama, had heard that thin, deathbed sound. It had played from 10,000 cracked phone speakers until it felt like the city's own breath breaking. "Connor Blackwood told us to prepare," Maggie said. "I'm telling you what that means. Bowl. We stop thinking like separate crews, separate schemes, separate wee fiefdoms. We think like one thing. One hard, ugly, unbreakable thing." She stabbed a finger at the map on the wall. "We build a citadel, here, in the ruins and the high-rises and the docks. We stock it, we wire it, we watch the roads in and out. We make it so that when the government sends in their death squads, and they will, they don't find a city already on its knees. They find a city that's had time to lift its fists." A murmur, not quite disbelief, not quite assent. One of the younger gang captains raised his chin. "How long do you think we can last, even with your citadel?" he demanded. "They've got drones, tanks, satellites. They turn off our power, turn off our water, we're done." Maggie nodded. "Aye," she said. "If we were just Glasgow, we'd be done. If we hope some cavalry's coming from elsewhere in Britain, we're done." She let her gaze sweep the room. "But that's not what I'm betting on," she said. "I'm betting on something else." "What?" someone called. "I'm betting on the fact that we'll be the only ones ready when this kicks off proper," Maggie said. "Once folk in other cities realize what's happening, some of them will fight back. They'll lose at first, they'll try alone. They'll fail. But if we hold out long enough, if we make ourselves a beacon instead of a graveyard, then when they look north for help, they'll see it." She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "They'll see a city that didn't roll over," she said. "A city that prepared when the dead man whistled. A citadel they can flee to, or fight beside." The room absorbed that. In the silences between heartbeats, the idea settled like dust on old wood. Not just surviving, becoming a symbol. Nay more jokes about wee Glasgow, poor Glasgow, forgotten Glasgow. The city that once built ships for empires might, just might, become the one that helped break one. Callum stepped up, his presence solid as a brick wall. "I've seen what happens in countries that don't prepare," he said, his voice rough with memories of burned-out precincts and penciled casualty counts. "Places where folk thought, it'll blow over. They can't mean it," he took a breath. "The squads they send in, they come smiling," he said. "They say it's just a curfew, just a checkpoint, just a temporary relocation. By the time anyone realizes what's really going on, it's usually too late." He met the eyes of the people in front of him, one by one. "We don't have to let it be too late here," he said. "We can make this a hard target. They'll still come, they'll still try, but they won't forget the reception." The priest raised a hand. "This citadel," he said, quietly. "Who gets in? Just the ones who can fight? Just the gangs and the soldiers?" Maggie shook her head. "No," she said. "Fighters first, because we need them to hold the walls. But a citadel can't just be walls and guns, it has to be kitchens, Clinics, workrooms, places where bands can sleep without hearing boots on the stairs. She hesitated. I'm not the one to decide how we sort that, she admitted. I'm good at the nasty bits. I'll make sure anyone who tries to breach our lines wishes they hadn't. But we're going to need organizers, medics, teachers. People who know how to keep a community from tearing itself apart in a siege. Her gaze found the nurse, the community organizer, the priest. If you're here, she said, it's because someone told me you were good at more than surviving. I'm asking you to help keep this citadel human. The nurse straightened. We're already rationing at my ward, she said. If this escalates, the hospital will get commandeered or abandoned. I'd rather be where there's a plan. The organizer nodded in grim agreement. Folk are scared, she said. They'll listen to anyone who looks like they know what they're doing. Better us than some government man with a board and a transport list. The priest sighed, half laughing. Looks like God's moved my parish boundaries again, he said. A low, uneasy chuckle rippled around the room. Maggie took it as assent. Then it's settled, she said. Tonight we start moving supplies into our safe points. Tomorrow we start quietly relocating folk we trust to the core zones. Over the next week, we turn our bit of Glasgow into the hardest place in Britain to take on foot. She paused. And when the first of their special units comes up the motorway, she added, her voice soft as a threat, we'll be ready to greet them proper. Someone at the back muttered. If they come. Hannah, standing near the exit, finally spoke. They'll come, she said. Heads turned, some in recognition. Connor's friend, the fallen journalist who'd kept shouting after the cameras went off. Some in surprise that she was there at all. She stepped forward, clutching a hard drive like a talisman. I've seen the memos from Home Office, she said. The funding increases for certain rapid response teams. I've seen the drills, the new kit. The pilot schemes in places you've never heard of, because they were small and out of the way. She drew a breath. They have units ready for this, she said. Units whose job it is to go into non-compliant zones and reduce numbers, round folk up, implant them, or erase them if they don't fit the metrics. Silence fell again. They'll come, she repeated. They'll come north, and they'll expect to find a city already starving and fractured, a city that'll gratefully shuffle into their trucks for a bowl of soup and a warm bed. Her gaze was flint. If we do this, she said, nodding at the map, at the lines of the future citadel, we're not just saving ourselves, we're spitting in the face of the plan itself. The room seemed to tilt, as if the axis of the evening had shifted, and something that had been hypothetical had just become brutally real. Maggie looked around one last time. Questions? She asked. There were none. Good, she said. Then from this night on, Glasgow is not just waiting for the apocalypse. We are preparing for war. Outside, the Clyde lapped at its own dark banks. The lights of the city flickered, not yet fully aware of the hunger that was coming. Far away, in a secure facility, ringed by fences and guards, the last convoy's trucks were unloaded by men who had no idea their cargo might have saved a city. And somewhere, in the data centers beneath London, code ticked over. Thresholds, timers, algorithms built to decide how many people could be allowed to survive the storm the government itself was brewing. In the growing shadow of that storm, the first sketch of the citadel was drawn, in felt-tip pen, on an old paper map. Soon, it would be drawn in brick, blood, and fire.